Hello.
And take it away.
Hi, I'm Patrick. I produce content for Jaunt VR. I've been there for the last year. Prior to that, I studied interactive media at USC. Kind of was there when all this VR stuff was happening, and kind of went back to school because I was just wanting to do interactive cinema in one form or another, and it turned out that the VR headsets are perfect, where it's hard to get people to click on a screen and interact with a video, and that really has never been widely adopted other than for novel experiences. What's great about working in the VR space is your video is immediately interactive, whether you like it or not. So I guess a few more people, let people filter in, but let's see. So Jaunt's been around for 2+ years, kind of was operating stealthily for a while. When I was at USC, I had made my own 3D 360 video rig, and I was kind of hacking stuff together, and realized after doing a project, it would be great to have some engineers to help streamline this whole process. So now at Jaunt, we have a lot of automated tools, but I don't want to limit our kind of discussion here today to just what Jaunt has in terms of its products and tools, because currently you can't go out to the store and buy them. So having worked with other stitching software and other video rigs, I'm happy to go into just what you guys could access. So maybe I think the first thing I'd like to know is just how many people have shot some 360 or 360 3D video? Nice. And how many people have gotten that fully through to a finished product that they've been psyched about? All right. And then how many folks are just kind of seeing a 3D video and are just kind of intrigued, but not necessarily yet taking the plunge? Awesome. So overall, I'd just like to say for this workshop, we've got 90 minutes. I've got a loose outline. I've never taught a class before, but so feel free to help me out and ask questions as we go along, and we can pause and dive into anything you guys want to talk about. So just feel free. This is a casual environment. This is not a lecture. This is we should get to know each other and have a good time and share as much information as we can with each other. So let's see. So cinematic VR, what does that mean? Or live action VR. And right now, from the Jaunt perspective, cinematic VR basically means stereoscopic spherical video. So it's a fully surround video that's 3D video, meaning there's a left and right eye, and you can't necessarily walk around in the video. You can just simply, your head is fixed in a location wherever that camera was, and you can look around wherever you want. So really, people often say when they're talking about where we're at with VR and then specifically with cinematic VR, kind of the line is, this is it's like the birth of cinema, which is in many ways sort of true. The tools are really, prototypes right now. The process of how you get your imagery and your content developed, let's say, is still an ongoing challenge for the computational photography engineers and computer scientists. But I would say, we could even take a step further back and really say that we're kind of more akin to the birth of photography. I think a lot of what we're doing right now, we're not at what the next movie will be. We're not on the holodeck now, especially not with live action, but even with real-time engines and photoreal content, we're very nascent. So there's a lot of time but the stuff we have is so cool. And as you could imagine, when the photograph came out, when you saw a photograph, you were blown away. So when you look at a 3D spherical video right now, you're blown away if you've never seen it before. But in terms of getting into, the level of complexity that kind of I think many people envision for the long-term VR, we're very early on. So with that in mind, we've kind of, I think it's important just on the onset to kind of, as probably people are saying throughout these conferences, it's a new medium. If you'd be kind of amiss if you just try to see what works in TV, see what works in movies, and try to translate that to this space. I think you really want to be thinking about theater, thinking about games, both video games and just games as interaction models. And you don't want to limit yourself to just translating one medium to the next. So with Jaunt's content and kind of what we've been up to for the last year as we've started to release content, well, we actually only released our first piece last November, so I think we've got like 8 or 9 pieces out there and probably 100 pieces that will eventually kind of make their way through the pipe to finish. And I've probably shot in the past year like 30 plus shoots of one form or another. And a lot of this is exploring still of what's going to work. So the nice thing of where we're at now is, you're going to benefit from making lots of mistakes because everyone's going to be making mistakes throughout this process. So what we kind of think of our content, or how I'd like to think of the content for now, is you've got your fictional, dramatic kind of shoots. I mean, not to say that they're all dramas, but just staged shoots as content. Then you've got live events, which could be concerts or big, red carpet events, or sports, obviously. And then you've got documentary, which would include tourism or adventure sports or social justice aspects, all that kind of stuff. And so for the spherical video scene right now, it's kind of all falling into these basic bins, you might say. And I'm going to go in a moment into just this last year of Jaunt for me, but just want to let you know that one of the major things when you're starting to work professionally in the landscape of VR is that you're signing non-disclosure agreements every other day with everybody you're working with. And as much as I'd love to go in depth and break down some of the more recent shoots that I've been working on that I'm very excited about that will be coming out in the next month or so, I'll have to talk vaguely and not mention any names. But that's part of the landscape we're in right now. Everything you're engaging with is still in development, still not productized, and so that's what you have to deal with when you start to work in the VR space. So yeah, and as we go, once again, just raise your hand if you want to go into anything specific. But I'm going to bring up our Jaunt production player here. So to give you just a sense of what I've been up to for the last year, as I said, done shoot after shoot after shoot, some of which are just test shoots, some of which are for final release, all of which at the end of the day are largely experimental, just by the nature of the technology. So one thing, as this is a young medium and you start to work with established media players, you realize that they don't know what you're doing, they don't necessarily understand it, and you're kind of the new kid on the block that doesn't have a lot of clout here. So oftentimes you're put in less than ideal situations as you try to produce this stuff. Now, obviously, the more you do, there's great situations, but a lot of it is kind of, people think like, well, can't you just put the camera there and this will be awesome? You're on the red carpet, right? It's like, well, but there's 100 photographers just flashing when I turn around, and it's not really that fun to just stare at these flashes in my eyeballs and then crowds coming by. It's, it's kind of, these uncontrolled situations are often very challenging to work with and get good stuff out of. So as an opening example, just as a little story of kind of one experience I had early on last October and / November, we had been talking to, I'll bring it up and so we have a little visual aid. So we had been talking to, the studio for The Hobbit, and it was kind of one of those things where it's off and on, like, well, we want to do a VR piece because we need a VR piece for marketing, but we can't really let you, do a full shoot, and we can't really let you produce a fully, realized piece, and we need it next week. So can you fly to New Zealand today and go shoot something in New Zealand for The Hobbit? And so they have this town called Hobbiton, which is the set where they shoot the like Hobbiton scenes, or the Shire scenes. And the assignment was just kind of like, go take some videos of Hobbiton, and that will be awesome. So you try to do something a little bit more, which in that case was, hey, can we get a guy in the Gandalf costume, and at least there's somebody there. This is a video. A static landscape might, not be the most compelling. Oh, wait, hang on. So, once we were kind of able to frame it like, hey, like let's like be in the world of the film, not just on the location. They did send over the costume from Weta, and we got one of the guys that worked at Hobbiton to dress up and wear the prosthetic nose and the beard and walk around. And, for better or for worse, as simple of a piece as it is, just that little bit of bringing some life to the space, I think, at least made it more than just shots of trees and hills. But, at the same time, so you're working with, every shoot you do is a minimum, in Jaunt's case, 16 camera shoot. But in any case, of any rig you're going to use, it's at least like a 4 or 5 or 6 camera shoot, most likely, if you're doing just monoscopic spherical video. And it's hard for us to understand, or coming from the world we live in now with video and how commodified it is, where I can shoot 4K videos on my phone, and I can immediately put them on YouTube and watch them at high quality. That's just simply not how it works right now when you're talking about shooting 16 cameras at all times. So what we had to do here is and you're also dealing with massive data sets, huge gigs of data, huge amount of gigs of data. So in this case, I flew to New Zealand, scouted this location, shot for a day, then went to a place in a post studio, uploaded all that footage back home, because we had to render it at that point we had to render it on our local render farm. They had to send it back, had to fly to London 3 days later to show the demo to the Peter Jackson and all these people so they would approve for us to release it. And that all kind of had to happen in a week, which would seem for a normal video like, what's the big deal? But for this, it's like I was on a layover in San Francisco handing over drives to people from the company so they could render the footage and then they could upload it to me later. So it's been a wild year of adventuring through things, but we're still very much just getting the lay of the land and also convincing the people you're working with what it takes to do something truly compelling in this space. So something we're also often working with is, in order to establish this medium as a commercial medium, which is, at the end of the day, is important. As much as I want to just be a freewheeling artist, just making trippy stuff and making acid trips for people to experience in VR, we're gonna need things like ads for Bud Light or ads for fashion companies or promos for movies like this. And to go through one other shoot along those lines, here's a fashion piece we had done where we had a creative brief, and this was actually kind of a shoot, and we were shooting for VR but also for the commercial they were doing. But suddenly you're working in fashion, and the day before our shoot, the designer decided, no, you can't show our collection. And it's like, okay, so we're in France for this brand 7 for All Mankind. That's a California jeans company. What are we supposed to do with this chateau we just rented for 2 days? And so you find yourself the night, and then the client has no idea what's possible with the medium, right? So it's kind of, they're like, well, can you edit something? Can you do this or that? So the night before the shoot, I was able to just kind of come up with a basic thing of, well, maybe the model walks into this chateau, and it's all cold and wet and uncomfortable, and so she has this dream of being back in California. And I'll break this project specifically down in a little bit, just of some of the technical things that went on to achieve this kind of effect. But once again, you just you make something up on the spot in some of these cases, or you're put in difficult situations, and you kind of need to improvise, which is cool for right now in this medium because, like I said, everything's in a sense experimental. And then to go through a little more specifically with live events and specifically concerts, which I think has been something that everyone has kind of, our first piece was this Paul McCartney concert where you're on stage with Paul McCartney, and it's immediately compelling. It's an easy idea to get your head around of like, wouldn't it be cool to be on stage? But you do more concert shoots, and this is definitely pretty cool that I'm right next to Paul McCartney, and I can see the drummer over here, but there's these guys too, like, it's kind of cool to see for a little bit, but maybe not always the most compelling thing. It sort of takes away some of the glamour of being on stage. And I don't know if you've ever been on stage at a concert. It's not necessarily, it's cool, but you kind of got to just sit there and not get in anyone's way and not, be too much of a spectacle. And you start to see, something that's also compelling about being at a concert, why we go to concerts, is to be amongst people. And people like to look at the crowd and see what's going on there, and there's an unpredictable nature of what you might catch there, and you can explore that crowd and discover things in it. So kind of as we progressed, here's a Jack White concert. It's like, okay, like, let's, here I am on this stage, but what if I were standing on that stage? How would I feel? I'd probably feel pretty awkward if I was just sitting right in the front and all these people are looking at me. I'm not really part of the band, so I'm just kind of awkwardly sitting there. So as we did more concert shoots, kind of discovered that maybe it's better to be with the crowd. This is an early example of still, when I'll go, as we go through this, kind of what works and what doesn't. It's a little less than ideal because the camera's very high. So, when you look down, it's kind of like, well, I'm not really part of the crowd. I mean, but, I'm getting closer. And so some of the more recent concert stuff we've done that I can't talk about, we're really kind of putting you in that place, in that middle ground between being able to get the best seat in the house of the performer, but also feeling comfortable and in the environment you're placed in, and largely has to do with feeling like a member of this crowd, and when you go to a concert, being part of the crowd is what a lot of us go to concerts to experience anyway. It's not just the performer, it's also the experience of other people. So from concerts, then I'll just go, let's see, another example to take that intimacy somewhat further, which throughout all of this, I'd argue that one of the great things we can do now with VR video is just have intimate experiences with people, or actors or performers, and so maybe there's something that could be more compelling than just simply being at a concert, but being really just with the group, more in a music video sort of scenario. And there's also, you start to have some more narrative possibilities in that space. Because if you're gonna watch, and this applies, I would say, to sports as well as concerts, it's just a question like, are you gonna sit in this headset for 3 hours? And if you're watching football, yeah, I'm on the sideline, that's pretty cool, but then they're over there, and they're just a few pixels in the end zone, and they're over there, and my face is getting hot, and I can't talk to anybody. So I think we need to start thinking of what can this do that's, as I said before, different than what other mediums are already doing really well. Like TV does an amazing job covering football, and I think it's going to take some time before VR competes gives a truly better experience of an overall game. But being in the locker room with players, being in backstage with the band, that's something that feeling present in that space, I think, can bring a lot to that and bring this intimacy to the experience. And then the last kind of bucket of content that I was talking about was dramatic or fictional narrative content. So this was something we did with New Deal Studios, and it was a miniature city where it's a kaiju battle that comes in. So here we'll go into more of the specific challenges shortly. But just to say, in a way, for me, a lot of these kinds of things, whether it's fiction or not, they can work really well for the state of the medium because you have total control over the space you're working with. And that's kind of why I have this maybe somewhat pretentious title for this workshop today is, when I'm talking about the architecture of time, what I really want you to be thinking about is versus a movie, you're capturing spaces. And when you begin to edit spaces together, you're really seeing how different architectures fit together over time. So that's kind of a broad overview. And I think what I'd like to do is go into a more practical participatory experience, and we can start to really ask questions. So I'm going to set up a Jaunt camera, and we can shoot some stuff, which I won't be able to render right now. We render all of our stuff in the cloud, and it requires like a really fast internet connection to put up like 100 gigs of footage. But I think it could just be a good way for us to kind of get away from me just talking at you, and you can start to ask questions of what your concerns are.
Yeah, so John is pursuing every aspect of this pipeline and process. We've got, a lot of people think we're a camera company, but actually we're building the cameras so we can create content. So we're, going from building the cameras to creating the pipeline of not only stitching, but just efficiently managing media. And then we have our own algorithmic stitching process that we're constantly upgrading and working on. That's stitching it all together. And then we have teams working on applications and the final delivery of that. So players, and then eventually more tools to bring more interactivity to these videos. I saw you had a question as well. So the difference between a stereo pair and then a computational photography approach is a stereo pair, you are getting the native stereo image, right? When you're using computational photography in this way, like I said, you know where the pixels are in depth. So you're actually creating a depth map of that sphere you've captured. Once you have that depth map, you put a virtual camera with two eyes, like an Oculus plugin or something, like if you've used Unity at all, and you're actually looking at 3D geometry with the color information mapped onto it, and you're getting your stereo pair after the fact. And so why I say this is the kind of the approach that will end up what goes forward, and this is not even, Jaunt specific per se, is that once we kind of want to move beyond just being able to look around in a video and start to actually move around in that video, all these algorithmic solutions are kind of what are going to enable that, versus shooting stereo pairs and trying to get the seams out. That kind of ends at spherical video. And even there, you're talking about generally a lot of hand correction to imagery. And what you don't want to kind of fall into is if you're doing everything in like rotoscoping out individual characters to get rid of seams, you're talking about highly not cost-effective methods to be able to produce content at any kind of scale. So you do, I think the folks working in this space on the computational photography side, that's what we're trying to do, is to be able to efficiently make content, so you're not spending all your time in Nuke or other compositing tools just fixing problems with the imagery. So I'm going to continue just going through setting this up real quick. So a few of the modifications we've made that we're working with, our prototype cameras using GoPros. Like I said, since they overheat, we've added things like heat sinks to the outside. We've also taken away the battery. We're not using the GoPro batteries for a number of reasons. One, they don't last that long. We're trying to shoot a 3-hour concert. That's just not going to work. So we use a traditional. We have this thing has multiple motors and packs them all together, and we use a traditional Anton Bauer professional style video camera battery to power the rig. Not only does it allow us to do longer records, but it also takes a lot of that heat generation of the batteries out of away from the GoPros. On the same token, we've added full-size SD cards readers to the GoPros, so we can use larger SD cards. And also, this is sort of like not necessarily scientific, but I found that the micro SD cards will tend to corrupt more easily than a full-size SD card. So we just powered up, and so we're still working with GoPros. And anyone that works with them, what you do is you use the Wi-Fi remote, so you can kind of slave them also remote. So that involves this really fun process of using a tiny screwdriver to turn on each remote. It's just a Wi-Fi button. 16. So you're at like a live event. You're like, it's like, okay, let me just turn it on to 16. Using a tiny screwdriver. So, a lot of the modifications we're making with our custom camera, obviously there's an on button and a record button, which is nice. Well, you wouldn't really, you got to literally take off the top, get in there, get that plate off the back of the GoPro, pull out the batteries. You gotta have a way to charge, so you get the GoPro batteries. You had a question?
Yeah. Why? Did you guys ever try using black Mac minis instead of GoPros?
Well, so we never did, and basically because we're building we're building our own camera. We have a hardware team that's building it all fully ground up, with the sensor, the lens, and everything, its own modules. So we couldn't really, you don't want to distract your hardware team hacking more hack cameras together. If you're trying, they were focused on that. So, this is done, I know we all recognize problems with GoPros, but they are, for where we're at in terms of the kind of playback we're getting on mobile, which is largely the only consumer available way to view content like Google Cardboard and things like that. We're getting the resolution we need out of it for now, but obviously as we, we started shooting with the new camera very recently. It's kind of, we're all excited to move away from it, but I think for everyone in the room, GoPros are a perfectly suitable tool to start experimenting, and start really today making content. Because there are off-the-shelf tools that you use to stitch stuff now. They have everything has its own issues and it can be challenging, but you can go buy 6 GoPros today, which is not cheap. Buy the stitching software and stitch 360 videos. Very good.
What's the intermediate resolution? Is it rendering everything after the final render? This would be GoPros.
Sure, we've kind of played around with a lot of different resolutions. I'm going to show you guys just basic using Premiere with this stuff. I found Adobe Premiere is kind of your best platform for editorial for this because it supports wonky, strange aspect ratios. Whereas things like that, you're going to have to do more playing, messing around with getting into views. And, we're using it's a square aspect ratio because you have your left eye on top, your right eye on the bottom. basically, we're working in editorial before we go to online with the edit. We're working around like 2K and using MP4s to get to not deal with massive file size. If you're talking like 30-second clip at full. Right now we publish at 4K. We can this rig will support will capture 6K imagery. But it's kind of, the playback devices right now are not needing that. Although quickly, all this is moving really quick, so we'll need more resolution soon. But 30 seconds of 4K by 4K video gets to be like 50 gigs or something, or 60 gigs. So you have these, once you have a bunch of shots, it becomes pretty untenable. And getting playback on that kind of resolution when you're trying to do fine cutting stuff. So we'll work with kind of 2560 generally. Around that resolution. And then once we go to the final online, we'll go up to 4K ProRes MOV. And we'll do, our system does allow, and most of these things you can kind of output whatever resolution you want. But if you look around like video stuff that's out there on the floor, we're quickly gonna want more resolution, and resolution makes a big difference. But then you're getting into, working with probably most of H.264 codec for MP4 is this very standard compression codec. There's H.265. You really need to work with H.265. H.265 is supported on a lot of devices. So that is literally where we're at. We need to have new codecs, compression sizes and codecs that can be supported across devices in order to get the best experience. So we're always right at the edge of what standard video production will support at the moment.
Do you get a higher resolution because of the overlap?
Yeah, so you could say you could add up to 1920 by 1080 on all these cameras and come up with the absurd resolution. But when we taking into account the overlap, we're getting what we're really getting is a 6K. Moving forward, we're going, again, higher res and all of that. So I'm going to turn on all my Wi-Fi buttons that I use for remotes and power them all on. One thing I've noticed is it's better to turn on the Wi-Fi buttons and try to power each one of them on. Just a little pro tip.
Do you foresee the future possibility of changing to building exclusively using short
Again, you get into this challenge of this trade-off of right now everything's going generally as wide as you can. Although you can go crazy wide and then you start getting more distortion on the edges, like you have the 180 fisheye and all realize so this is not that wide, but you need that overlap. So, and again, since and I would say no, you wouldn't use long lenses ever. If you're using a computational photography approach, you're creating this depth map, right? So if I want to defocus stuff, if I have that depth information, I'm going to do that in post. I'm going to say, throw everything out of focus after, 6 feet. But I'm not going to capture it. Right now, I just want as much data as I possibly can get of video data. And then I'm going to manipulate that data in order to get more expressive with things like camera lenses and stuff like that.
How about the frame rate? The frame rate when you mentioned especially 2 per second. Why 3
Yeah, so these are actually, again, since we are not long-term pursuing logos, we're using 3 plus, not the 4. They have the same sensor. You do want to be capturing at minimum that 5994 frame rate, and you want your end product to be also at 5994. When I was doing my experiments for drugs, I was doing something like 24 frames, and it seems like that's cinematic cool, but once you kind of go high frame rate in this medium, you really don't want to go back. So yeah, 5994, we're shooting at 1920 by 1080. Now, if you use other rates, I've used
use some underwater rigs, like this rig for color. Just that, so that's what I went with. You know, there you do want to shoot with the 1440 setting. So it's 1080, 1920 by 1440 instead of 1920 by 1080. Because in that case, you know, for those cubic rigs where it's 6 cameras as a cube, you really have like so little overlap there, right? Like, so you want that image to be that aspect ratio of each camera to just give you as much as you can to get some.
Building on that, you mentioned there are 3 available. Do you recommend one or the other? In terms of GoPros, I heard the advantage of 4 doesn't have the ability to do frame sync.
So that's true. You can use like the stereo back thing, which you can see. You have to hack together for like GoPro, but. They have for the 3 Plus, they haven't done it yet for the 4, maybe they will. They have the stereo pair with a little 3D camera rig. I don't know if you've seen that. It has a little cable that goes from one camera to the next, so it frames it. Again, the way we're using GoPros at the moment is that we're capturing everything that I meant for, and once again, through the post-processing, we're doing all the syncing in post. That brings up issues, in terms of things like strobing lights, like what I was saying with you're at a photo shoot and people are flashing, and the flash may not be perfectly simulated on that frame. So that's, that was one of the top requirements for custom cameras that definitely possibly want to jet block those cameras. The other issue with GoPros is that you have a rolling shutter, so that it's capturing. There you have your sensor, and it's kind of capturing like this, and it's like right aligned with the image down the sensor. And so what we really want is a global shutter, so it's capturing that whole sensor image at once. But again, you can go buy GoPros and put them together now, and mess around with this stuff. I don't know that there's any off-the-shelf stereo rigs for a 3D spherical. Which to me is very important. You can do very convincing. You can shoot with stuff that has some really great depth, and maybe you have some camera movement for a 3D or a 360 setup. It can feel pretty good, but if you have a good stereo, one thing, again, this isn't a new medium, and it's a natively 3D medium. It's not like 3D movies where you have a medium, or you amplify it with stereo. This is a 3D virtual reality, so I feel that it's important, if possible, to use in 3D. So something other people will do is shoot a 2D sphere and then do a 3D conversion on it. So, which is what most movies are doing these days anyway. You're shooting. So there's amazing people that do great stereo conversions. If you have, money. So here I am, got the camera power on. One thing I forgot to do was put in my SD cards. So our system, our software will recognize these are all built and we know all the serial numbers, and so when you put in an SD card, it knows which camera it is and which system. But for those of us without, or for those of you without like your own Jaunt tools, for all of you, what you probably want to do is number your cameras and number your cards, because that would be a nightmare. Which we do anyway, because if I get like a card corruption, I want to be able to very quickly look back and see where that's happening.
Is Jaunt ever, is Jaunt considering commercially consumer software?
I probably am not allowed to like willy-nilly say what our commercial plans are. Like, I make content. I'm not a businessman, but I think it's like we're building our own camera. We're not going to be shooting with this camera for in a while, or the next few months. Hopefully, will largely be off this kind of continuing with. So there could be a possibility space where
source this stuff. You break your own rate. But again, I'm sure whatever this is latest. But yeah, I think there's a hope. But again, so everything that we're doing and everything everyone in this space is doing is in process, right? So we don't want to rush and put out software to everybody and then have a million people going like, well, I'm getting this bug when I do this. So we're selectively working with partners to just keep battle testing our software in a controllable way before we just kind of throw it out and let people go on well. But I think, it's definitely long term. That's a whole lot. These rigs into as many participants as possible. But you still would have to buy 16 GoPros, which is so cheap. Yes.
You just like the exposure compensation and the gain compensation equally on that, or
I would recommend doing I keep all your settings the same on every camera. What I've found is, we're at the GoPro settings, so it's we do an ISO limit of 1600. So it kind of gets you decent exposure without having too much noise in the light. I think there's an ISO limit of 6400, it would just be noise. But actually, if I'm shooting something I was shooting some fire the other day as a test, and there I did an ISO limit of 400, so it doesn't, where things are black or dark, it doesn't try to blow those all up, and doesn't add a ton of noise. One thing you'll find in shooting in low light, and kind of rather than things being out of focus to the lens, when as you're adding noise to your image, stuff just looks out of focus. The best stuff to shoot with GoPros is outside during the day. John, we're really trying to every aspect, so it's tricky with concerts and stuff, where you have something that has spotlights or strobes that are on. We were shooting a couple of band members have white hair and white beards and the white guys, and the white spotlights blasting on them, and something they look like ghosts. So what I do in that case is I put there's an EV setting. So you do the EV -1 or -2, depending on the scenario. Usually in that kind of hard light concert experience.
See, this is the thing. I've got to use my hands. It kind of relaxes me at this point. So I use the EV -1 in a concert scenario, and then you do all right. But almost there, which is another funny thing. A lot of our early shoots, it's so as a producer at Jaunt, and we're kind of expanding now, and we're we have a much bigger production team, but you would go to a shoot by yourself, you do all the shooting, then you come home, you do all the data management, you do all the handling with the relationships of the client and working with the people, then you're doing all the editing, so it was very much like a one-man show, and it would always be very fun when you'd get back and the marketing people would be like, why didn't you take any behind-the-scenes videos? It's well, I've got 5 things going on here. I've got 16 things going on. So I've got I gotta power this off and then power it back on, because when you put in SD cards, it doesn't automatically recognize. Power this on. So the other side of this whole equation that is ever important in any kind of video medium, but I would argue more important in this kind of immersive video, is your sound. For any filmmakers, sound always gets the last thought, even though it's equally important to the image. And so what we're doing is using a Tetra mic, which is a mic that has 4 little condenser mics in one, and it's recording 4 mono channels of audio. But what you need on the back end of that is you need to decode that into space. And so what we call that is ambisonic audio. So anyone that's There's ambisonic audio allows you to work in a spatialized audio sense. So not only is it creating this sphere, but you can also do things like zoom audio in. You can kind of manipulate the audio in space using ambisonic audio. One of the tools that's off the shelf that allows you to work with ambisonic audio is called Reaper. And I think they have a free version, so that's worth checking out for that. It's called Reaper. Reaper. So the way this ambisonic mic works is you got to have a 4-channel audio recorder, and you need to use an audio recorder that you can digitally gang all 4 channels, because you need each microphone to be recording at the exact same audio level. So by digitally gang, I can just assign every channel to a single knob and adjust them at once. So actually, I might need a hand for this part. So once we have that ambisonic hooked up, let's see. What I would say, though, is the ambisonic audio in most cases, when we are actually going to finally publish something, is more of a guide and sort of the ambient audio of the space. But if you want to do anything that involves dialogue and discrete sound that is important and clean, we'll still use lavalier mics and mic our people, and then use the ambisonic audio as a way to position that in space as a guide. Like, certainly you have the visual as a guide, which if you talk to some of the sound design folks we work with, there's not a lot of tools yet for those guys in terms of how do I both look at stuff in the Rift while I mix. But so you can use the ambisonic, though, is like very precise in terms of how that person's voice or whatever the additionally recorded audio is going to live in that space. So we'll do either a final ambisonic design using those elements like lavalier mics, or we'll also do Atmos mixing, which is Dolby's kind of directional or object-based audio system. Exactly, yeah. So any of the narrative work we're doing, we put lavalier mics on the folks. We're always using the ambisonic, for our bass line. Few other, let me grab my notes here. So some things to consider as this is getting set up, but as we go into a shoot. So pretty much any of these rigs is going to have some kind of minimum distance from the camera. Because I need that overlap on imagery, if I'm right here, it's going to be very hard for more than one camera to see every pixel that's being captured on my face. And that's going to make it very difficult to get a perfect stitch. So for us, it's that like 1 meter distance from the camera generally, so like 3 or 4 feet. You're in a pretty good zone to get a good, stitch on that stuff. Something I've also, it seems like you have and actually it's kind of funny when I started and you talk to the engineers, it's like, you just put the camera down and hit record, right? Like that's all it is. And it's like, height doesn't matter, or this doesn't, and it's like, so it seems like you've given up a lot of control, and you kind of have, you're not operating in a traditional way. But like camera height is super important to making a compelling experience. A lot of the early stuff I had seen was just kind of, you'd put the camera pretty high so people couldn't get that close to it, or whatever the reasoning was, or you'd put it at a 6 foot tall or plus eye line. And that can make for a really kind of disturbing sort of sense if you're just a little too high. So I always am shooting just a bit lower. I'm kind of shooting at like my chin height. I have the lenses, and that always feels more natural. I can't really like scientifically explain what that is, but I'm pretty sure it has to do with just using super wide lenses in this way. Then the other thing that you might consider when working with a rig like this is, so on the top and bottom we only have 2 cameras, right? So we're clearly getting a lot less information there. And actually in the video sphere that we're generating, the top and bottom is kind of falls off to 2D. And when you think about it, if you're using a stereo pair, or if you're looking at a stereo image, when I'm looking around this way, it's pretty clear how my head's gonna be oriented and how that pair is gonna work. It's like left and right, left and right. Once I start looking up or down, I could be looking from so many different orientations that you get into a more difficult, how do you know how to orient that stereo pair? And so everything we're doing at this stage in the game is pre-rendered content, right? So it's not gonna, versus like a video game real-time engine like Unity or Unreal, where there are 3D objects, everything's pre-rendered. So you kind of need to, so generally you're gonna fall off to 2D on the top and bottom. With that in mind though, let's say you're doing like the Kaiju Fury shoot with miniatures and guys in suits and you wanna put the camera on the deck of the set, and suddenly, you know, I've got this 6-foot monster who's mostly being captured by these top 2 cameras. So the nice thing of shooting a sphere of video is that in post, you can rotate that sphere however you want. So in that case, what I did was kind of tilt, you know, not like this exactly, but tilt the camera back so I'm getting my most important information captured where I have 12 lenses around. And then you bring that into post and just rotate your sphere back down. Another thing that always comes up as you start to work with outside directors and other folks is, where's my live preview, and how am I supposed to direct, because I can't, where am I supposed to go? And what I like to do, but most big level Hollywood directors don't seem too into it, is to crouch Indian style under the camera and I can see what's going on. And you know, as we move into our new camera, we're definitely working on live monitoring and being able to look in Rift, but we're still shooting content today. So there's other solutions for that. So then you can take a plate of the ground once you move the camera out. This is only for a static shot, right? But if you're doing moving shots, which we have done where you have someone on steady cam, you're still gonna have to remove that dude underneath one way or another. Or if you're doing a drone, you have to replace the sky above it. So that, I have some examples that I can show of just, you know, the raw image and then what we do in compositing to kind of move around that. And actually, it's probably a good point to just show a couple. So in this case, this is not actually, I didn't shoot it this way because of the directing thing. It was more, I needed to light this room, this giant room, and I wanted to be able to see out the windows. So what you can do if you're careful about it is you shoot 180 and you have your director stand on one side. If it's a static scene or a static camera, then you shoot your other side and then you put those two together. Again, this is like, if you're, you know, it's great if you're in a controlled environment and you have that ability, you can definitely do things like that. Which brings up another kind of basic point of, as much as possible, you should try to shoot clean plates of whatever you're doing. So you can, because no matter what, you're gonna have probably some stitch problems here and there, and clean plates allow you just a lot more possibilities for correction of your imagery. Well, it depends on, so if I'm shooting on a beach and there's actors around, I need to shoot a plate of whatever the duration of the performance is. Because the ocean's moving, I don't want to start looping the ocean, right? So, but if I'm in that chateau and it's just a room, yeah, like shoot 30 seconds and you'll be fine. So moving or just to show a couple other. So one, Brooke here from Jaunt has the Ricoh Theta, which maybe some of you have seen. So this is another handy tool for the time being that can do spherical stills, and it can do very low res spherical video. No, I don't think it streams to your phone, right? It just, you can watch it later. There's another tool called, it's a Kodak camera called like the Pix Pro, the SP360, and that one will stream to your phone. And that we have been starting to mess around with more as a monitoring solution, and it's not bad in terms of just the lag and being able to see realistically. Other things we've done to monitor is hook up additional GoPros and hook those up to different iPads or iPhones and whatever, and look at it through the app. Of course, that only really is effective if you have a main area of action that you need the director to see. Which kind of going on from like, most people don't like to sit under the camera, even though that's the most effective way to live monitor. It's also, you know, when you're working with folks from traditional cinema, I find, you know, it really is a new way of thinking where it's not, you know, whatever you're shooting, you really have to get in here and go, okay, what's over there, what's over there, what's over there. You gotta check out everything. And there's so many, it's so often that some crew member left a piece of kit that seems like, oh, well, that shouldn't matter, right? But it's always the rule of thumb, if you can see the camera can see you. So it's definitely, a lot of the work I do is sort of just getting other filmmakers into that headspace of like, you really got to put your head down there and just take a look around. And, you know, when we get to effective, and a lot of the live monitoring solutions that are probably available today involve like a rig that's not nearly as portable as this. One of the reasons Jaunt has been able to shoot in a lot of concerts and different scenarios that are maybe more exclusive is people see the rig and they're like, oh, that's not so bad. That's not a crazy, huge piece of equipment that's going to be, you know, seen by all. It's pretty subtle. But then if you're shooting a dramatic piece, the way to approach it is to rehearse. And again, like in this age of endlessly shooting video and I can see everything immediately, I think, you know, sometimes people undercut the rehearsal process. But if you think of it more like a theater experience, more like a play, of course, you can rehearse the hell out of something. And projects I've done in the past, so yeah, you just rehearse the hell out of something and then let the actors perform. You listen to the audio and just how it's going and you're hitting away. And it's really, what's great is that it's an actor's medium, you know, and coming from the state of mainstream cinema today where kind of the cuts are every 2 or 3 seconds, like it's, a take is an actor, just a close-up going like these actors really get to perform and their whole body is being seen. With that in mind, and as we can kind of go into thinking about post on this stuff, you're generally doing long takes in this space. So like, if you saw like, you know, like Gravity or Birdman, like these are kind of proto VR movies in a way, because it's, you know, if you want that sense of presence, if you want to feel that you're there, if you can't cut all the time. It's also really, I think you can do a lot more editorial than people initially think if you're really controlled about it and you're doing this kind of matching the architecture of the spaces so that when I do a cut, it's not totally jarring. Some of the early experiments we did, we just kind of edited it like it was a movie, and it's kind of like, whoa, where am I? And you know, you just can see one thing and then you're on to the next shot. But people, you know, part of this is being able to explore a little bit as well as follow a narrative. Go ahead. Yeah. Yeah, so I'll use a few of the different things I've tried is using like LED light panels, because those are pretty compact and you can put a bunch of them in a ring underneath your camera. You can also do just really like a kind of space light or a China ball, either above or below, and then remove that. Then the other aspect is, building it into your production design. So having lighting like the Godzilla piece or the Kaiju Fury piece, it's a city, so we could have motivated lights. In the horror piece we did called Black Mass, you have like a bare bulb light in the scene, but it fits with the aesthetic. So I think it's, this whole idea of integrate, these different types of crew leads, cinematographer and a production designer working closer than ever to kind of design that effect. For exterior stuff, depending on the subject and how the light is, as long as you shoot a clean plate, you can definitely use bounce or additional stuff. So it depends on the controlledness of the situation. So in I'll use like LED panels or China balls in a more documentary space where I need it to be compact and as hidden as possible, because I know I'm not going to have a great opportunity to do a clean plate. So yeah, that would be kind of the gist of, and then working with GoPros again, and something that we, quickly on our new camera are trying to move, controlling exposure, right? So GoPros are auto irising or auto exposing all the time, and there's no real effective hack to kind of stop that and set it in any kind of efficient way. So what you find is actually you kind of often I have to underlight a bit so that you don't get, or if you don't want lights moving at all. We've done some stuff with moving lights, and then you get this whole global kind of shift of the lighting in the image. But it's a big challenge. I have in the past, and it's something that I'd recommend if possible, so long as you can just test your field of view and that you're not in there, and because these are super wide lenses, they're vertically oriented too. So your most field of view, whatever it is, 100. So this was a good lesson of, what I found with Steadicam personally is, while it's generally really great in a 2D movie, so here's a couple movement examples as well. This is like a crane, but I'll see if the Steadicam shot is in here and comes up. But the Steadicam creates this sort of corrective floaty effect that can actually, if not done really precisely, could be really nauseating. So what you really want to do is have a fixed horizon line no matter what you're doing. So you really need to be just cognizant of that and working, and at the end of, to the basic question is, you're going to have to replace him one way or another, him or her one way or another, which requires kind of increasingly, potentially complex visual effects comp work. But you can kind of see something here where we have, we missed it, but we had a Steadicam on a tank driving. And so you have the tank movement, but then you also have this Steadicam floatiness, where since then, if if you can rig to a car or a tank or whatever it is that's a moving object, and you have this fixed reference point. So we did something where I had it on the back of a motorcycle, and you have a fixed reference of the motorcycle. Your relationship to the motorcycle is fixed. You're moving through space, but I've got this grounding aspect that helps beat the nausea, the potential for that. So I don't think personally, I don't think Steadicam is a silver bullet solution for camera movement. We've had more success using the free fly Movi and having it, but again, then you're really high because you have to have it up above you. And that, I think it's great for what it can do at the time being, but I think, I see some of these, robotic kind of remote controlled car rigs buzzing around here today. And, I don't think we're quite there yet there either, because you need you don't want to just have really quick acceleration changes. You want to be moving at steady speeds. But I think, robots are really going to be where it's at. I mean, this thing is a robot head. It just needs its robot body. So let's see where we're at. Yes. Oh yeah, and even shoots I can't mention by name that we've done more recently. Like a lot of what I'm showing, like what I can show today, is we've done a lot since then, but it's just not been released yet. Definitely, cable cam rigs are a really useful tool, and also when you think about wire removal, like there's some pretty simple cable cam rigs these days that it becomes a pretty minimal removal. I mean, that's what you get into with different cabling rigs is where you're going to have to do wire removal. But, the industry, the traditional film industry is very good at that. But you want kind of minimal rigs. And then, there's you could also think of, if I have it, here's the setup for the drone. Drones, these drone pilots these days are really amazing. So drones, I think, are going to consistently be used for that kind of aerial work as well. But I think for what you're talking about, if you're falling off the building or something, a cable cam or a wire rig could work really well for that. And we've had success with using that kind of rig. So let's see. How far in are we? This is I've never spoken publicly for this long. That's okay. Yeah, let's go into post. So, like I said, you're managing huge amounts of files. So, your first step is, and the software we're building, which unfortunately we will be more public with very soon, but I'm not able to show it today. But basically, you'll take each of your SD cards, you put it into a USB hub with a bunch of SD card readers, and you kind of start downloading all your footage. For our system, it's immediately kind of organized and knows which camera module it's from. But if you're doing your own rig, you just have to be real careful of how you manage that media. Again, we're dealing with large proxy files, so we're doing proxy, or large full res files, so we're doing proxy offline editing generally. And then what I would say, just as more on the creative side of it, is as much as you can, if you're working in 3D 360 video, you should be viewing in 3D 360. So the stuff I've been showing here on the screen, it gives you a sense of what you have, but it doesn't really, if you're working on an edit project, you should view all your stuff in the Rift and see how it feels, make notes, and then, go into your cut, do exports throughout so you can, just to show you, these other views. So this is a Rift view, and that's, you don't want to be looking, you want to be looking at your stuff in Rift if that's where you're going to be delivering, or not to be specific to Rift, but that's kind of the most easily available tool right now for working off your computer. But any headset. Because as I said, as you start to think about editing here, the way things play in 3D is going to be very important to how it feels in the final experience in your cutting and your editing. So let me just bring up some Premiere stuff. So yeah, like I said, we're working in Premiere. In this case, I have 4K images that are MP4s that I just happen to have on me. But what you can see how this looks
Oh, that's a terrible way to view it. Hang on. So this is what I had showed you before of these plate shots. So this is this kind of lat long or stereo Mercator, or there's a bunch of other terms for it. But you're looking at, all 16 cameras are being stretched into a rectangular frame. And then there's the left eye on the top and the right eye on the bottom. So obviously, you can, when you're editing something like this, hang on, things that maybe are pretty big and I look pretty small in this, but in reality, I'm huge when you're looking at it in Rift, because the Rift is seeing just a tiny portion, of that full 360. So that's, again, you want to be just exporting as much as you can and looking in Rift, or there are plugins now for Premiere that allow sort of not the best quality, but a Rift viewable format as you're working in Premiere. No, so that's the left and right eye. So it's using different information from the full camera image of each GoPro to create, well, I guess I should describe it in a different way. I mean, basically you're generating, like I said, kind of a depth understanding of it, and then you're pulling a left and a right that corresponds with that depth information. So it's kind of hard to tell at this scale again, but it's very distinctly, there's a left and a right. Currently. But there are tools out there today that you can buy, what are some of them? PT GUI is one of them people use, or AutoPano Video. Those, they can be frustrating to deal with of talking to some people and the interfaces. But again, we're at early days. But if you can deal with it, you have to do a little bit more manual manipulation in those, of kind of manually aligning your images. Where with this kind of approach, with our approach, it is sort of you put it in the Jaunt box and it comes back and you've got it. But which is nice, but it's not to say you can't do it other ways. Yes. Yeah, you. Yes, it is. So that's the general rule of thumb for that interocular distance. It's interesting, as just to show you an example of other formats that we end up in. If I can. So our final published version, though, is a different layout. It's more of a cubic layout. We've got the top and bottom. We've got the left and right eye for the Mercator images, and then the top and bottom are these sort of tiles on the right. And that's, again, because when you're going to mobile devices or cross-platform and you need codecs that play efficiently, that full square resolution image is not as efficient to playback. Okay. This is, I don't know if you guys have seen this piece, but this is kind of a good early example of things you do to get away with edits. And horror works really well here. But you can do things let's see if we flash the lights on and off in your scene. I think we've done several pieces now where someone puts a hood or some kind of cover over the camera. So that's sort of a go-to. Then, and this, but again, it's sort of dependent on the piece. I find with a lot of this narrative fictional work, you want it to feel like real time. So 4 minutes of the video is 4 minutes of reality. For documentary stuff, and even I'd argue there's plenty of possibility in fiction stuff to cut more actively, so you don't. It doesn't necessarily have to feel like real time.
There's really no rule there. I mean, and it kind of gets back to probably a bigger conceptual question of like, do you always need to be, in this, it's very much a first person experience. There's, you're a character in the piece, but there's plenty of other examples and ways to think about it where you're kind of a invisible observer in the space. So these are kind of the more creative discussions about it, but just to throw that out there, like the first person, third person, whatever, maybe second person could be a good way to go here. So it's all it's undefined yet as to what's the best or whether one would be the best. I kind of argue that anything can work. To look at, so this one, we use kind of strobing lights to edit with. You'll see like a lot of other examples, at least of our stuff, where you'll have long fades. So this one, just to show you, so if you use like a long, like 1 second or 30 frame fade, half-second fade, it can just allow the viewer to kind of easily transition from one space to another. But another way you could go about it, and then back to that fashion piece that we had the plates in, just as a kind of example of, here we use, it's pretty clear you could look all around, but it's pretty clear most people are probably gonna look at the model walking by, because that's the only thing really going on. So I'm pretty certain like at this moment you're looking in this direction. And this is kind of plays back into production and blocking of how you guide your viewer to look over time. And then right there, I just do a match cut to the door from the other side and she comes through. So again, getting back to kind of the beginning of what I was talking about here, with kind of thinking of architecture and space over time. Whereas like film has sort of the graphic match, like I'm looking at a coffee cup and then I'm looking at a wheel of a car or something, the circles match. What you can go with here is you can match sort of architectural features of the space and then also use your action to guide people to where to view. Of course, they can always look wherever they want, but that's sort of, again, the fun directorial challenges here of how you steer that attention over time. And I think I have to wrap up, but just to one other note on that, and just to kind of end on a thought is, a lot of times when you first do these 360 movies, it's like 360 all the time. Like I don't know how many videos we have of a bunch of people in a circle around the camera, like doing stuff. And I'd encourage people to think of it not as 360 all the time, but just 360 over time. So the fact that I know that there's something behind me, even if it's dead space and it's not important, is helping me be more immersed versus like a 180 video. But that doesn't mean I have to use every angle of that video at all times. People don't want to be going like, that's not a good experience. So yeah. Yeah. Yeah, again, it has to do with image overlap. So towards the beginning, we were talking about, any pixel in space, like any part of you that I'm capturing with the camera is going to be captured with more than one camera. And then I'm, not me, but very smart computer scientists people are calculating the depth because they have, like 3 times overlap of that image. So 3 cameras are seeing some pixel of you. And so we know how they're related to each other, and so we can kind of triangulate that. Yep. Mm-hmm. So in editing, if I had a little more time, I could, I'm reorienting the sphere and to match edits correctly. Like maybe I shoot it one way and then realize like, oh, this would be way better if it cut from this primary direction to this primary direction, because probably they're going to be, like that fashion one. She's going to walk around. So I want to, even though I shot the other shot with the zero camera or the, hero directional camera, really the only point of having like a zero or hero directional camera of your rig is so you can align your microphone correctly, because you want those two spheres, your video sphere and your audio sphere, captured in the same orientation. But once you're in post, you can rotate those together. Generally, you can rotate them. When I was doing like editing that horror piece, I was using bits and pieces of sound from throughout the whole shoot, and because I have directional spheres of audio, I could throw different effects, even if they're not from that shot. Put it, a big bang to your left, so you're gonna hear it, look that way at that moment. And then just to go one step further with the kind of Atmos Dolby system, the more granular and specific you get, it can be a stronger cue, but it could also sometimes be a weaker cue, because you don't want, unless it's a like poetic choice, right, but you still may need to lead the attention there. If I hear a bang from back here, I may not immediately be able to detect like, okay, I'm gonna look right there. But if I lead someone, there's a very good chance, both with video but also audio, to kind of like lead them to a new direction of looking. But yeah, sound is huge and awesome. Okay, I think we're done. Sorry. Thanks.